Hello, welcome to the third stream for Let's Play Winnipeg. Before we get started here, I just wanted to mention a few things. So there was a few little bit technical difficulty issues that we were kind of trying to sort out in the 24 hours before the stream. So if you notice any issues, let's try and be as if some flexibility may be required. Other than that, I also think it's worth mentioning that behind the scenes, Corey King is going to be joining us as well, and he's going to be playing the games, and you may hear him pop in now and then to add some flavor text, I suppose. And yeah, so we'll just jump into it here. So just a little bit about IGDA Winnipeg. IGDA Winnipeg is a chapter of the International Game Developers Association, excuse me, which is the largest non-profit membership serving all individuals who create games. With the support of fellow co-chair Corey King, we at IGDA are working hard behind the scenes to provide all sorts of events and initiatives that will ultimately and hopefully, ideally, benefit our community. I want to encourage everyone to follow us on Facebook and Twitter to learn more about the work that we're doing, and follow us here on Twitch to get notifications when we go live in the future. Other than that, so about this particular event, this is Let's Play Winnipeg. It's an indie developer spotlight where we invite local game developers on stream to play a selection of their indie and game jam projects. During these Let's Plays, we'll have an opportunity to learn more about all of the creative and talented people in our community. We will also have a chance to learn more about their process and insights into the development of their projects. Thanks for watching, but that's an ending slide. So we'll jump right into it. We have, sorry, one moment. That is the Discord. I need to fix that. Let's go full screen here. So Brett, thanks for joining us. On a personal note, I thought it was cool to invite you on because we had a chance to talk on my podcast, and I think you are an example of someone in the community that's kind of successfully, successfully creating games. So thanks for joining.
I appreciate that. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah. So we're gonna start, I believe, with the first game that you published to Steam. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, Militia.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that's Militia. So I think what is maybe the best thing we'll do is give us a little bit about Militia and kind of how it plays, and we'll jump into it from there.
Sure. Maybe Corey, if you want to just hit the Learn tab and go through the tutorial while we do this. But so yeah, Militia is a turn-based tactical game, and the general idea is that you have like your little militia guys. In this case, they're these little black axes. And so you're going to be moving around on a grid, kind of like Advance Wars or something, or chess, and using your abilities to destroy these captains. So there's 5 orcs on the screen right now, but only 4 of them have stars, and those are the captains. And so you have to kill the ones with the stars in order to progress. And it's kind of born out of this idea, like a board game aesthetic. So I play a lot of like designer board games like Catan and Carcassonne and stuff like that. And in those games, they often have very simple rules, but that lead to a lot of emergent complexity and interesting decisions for a long time. So that's kind of what I'm aiming for.
So one thing, when I look at something like this isn't something that I would naturally gravitate towards. But it's interesting because I feel like I can see behind the scenes how much like logic and kind of connections and relationships with certain elements. And you mentioned its influence from board games?
Yeah, very much so. All the Brady games are, really.
So this is the first game that you published to Steam, but this is not... Is it correct to say this is not the first game that you actually released overall?
Yeah, I worked with Corey at Zenfry prior to starting Bringing Games, and so I worked on some game teams doing stuff like that. And then also, like, I've done some game jams here and there, but nothing like very polished or that finished, but just kind of like getting my feet wet with tools and experimenting.
Okay.
So yes, the answer to your question is yes. This is like the first formal game that
So I find a lot of times, or at least in my experience, a lot of the games that I make, I do make a lot of games by myself, but I also more recently have kind of branched out and made games with other developers. Is this a game an example of something that you worked with a team on, or more of a solo endeavor?
This one was more of a solo endeavor for sure. Yeah.
So go ahead.
I had a partner very early on for businessy type stuff, but not towards the end of the project. So yeah, for the most part it was solo. Yeah.
So the reason I bring that up is because obviously, as you are very well aware, a game is not just a concept or an idea or just a visual. It's a combination of all of those things.
Right.
So, I mean, when I look at this, you have, like, when we're looking at Militia on stream here, you have a UI, you have audio, you have icons. So there's a illustration aspect to this. Where do all these skills come from?
So the main skill that I lacked to make Militia is like art. Like I can't draw at all. I have like a little bit, like I'm semi-comfortable like arranging graphic elements and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But I can't draw whatsoever. So the graphics are inspired by actually a game called Cross Cells on Steam, which is like it's like a minimalist, very chill, zen, puzzly type game with this kind of like very minimalist aesthetic, like which is like blue squares on a white background and that sort of thing, and very like calming music and that sort of aesthetic. But the icons, so like the actual graphical part of it, are from a website called gameicons.net. .net? I think it's .net. I'm using that a lot for all the games, basically. I just really like. I'm a fan of like a minimalist aesthetic anyway.
Okay.
So it kind of worked out that way.
So you kind of like. It's interesting how you can intentionally use that to your advantage, where you maybe don't have a certain level of skills in an area, but that doesn't have to limit your kind of the work that you're doing, which is, I think, represented here and in many of your other games as well.
Well, yeah, I try to just really lean into it. So if it's going to be minimalist, make it like really minimalist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you
I'm
ever
sucking pretty hard on this one, Brett? You want to explain it to me?
Click. Don't move with your mage. Just click on the same cell.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
just keep in mind, Corey, when you click off of the screen, it pauses.
I can't unmute any other way.
Okay, it's fine. No, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. This was one of the sticking points in the tutorial for sure.
Okay.
Going through playtesting and stuff.
So I'm actually curious about playtesting. So like Corey got stuck there. How do you preemptively like mitigate that? Do you go through like do you just get your friends and family to play? How do you approach that?
This game was first released on Game Jolt and Congregate, I think.
Okay.
Before I ever released it commercially,
Mm-hmm.
just to like sort of get feedback from people and work through those types of issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that was helpful because like the communities on like a site like Congregate, like it's sort of like a mobile game type of community, like common game parlance would say like they're like more casual players, not as invested. And so what that basically means in practice is that they're like not as willing to put up with things that are unclear or sticking points, or like if the game ever gets too annoying in that sort of a context, people will just like jump right out or leave a comment or whatever. Like you'll hear about it. So that was helpful. It was kind of like a trial by fire type of thing to like have the game exposed to that type of an audience first to like work through those sort of like understanding, comprehension, UI type stuff.
Another thing that I personally find interesting is the behind the scenes. I was always a big fan growing up of the TV show How It's Made. So to translate it to your projects here, can you give us an insight to behind the scenes of like what's happening? So like as these tiles are moving, what kind of system is allowing them to do the actions that they're doing?
You mean programming wise?
Yeah.
So they're all Bringy games are programmed in Unity, and I also use a library called Grids Pro, which I don't know if it's even available anymore. I think they released like Grids Pro 2 or something, but there are lots of like grids, like board type libraries available. And then in terms of like the movement and stuff, a lot of that is done with a library called Dotween, which is like, I think basically it should just come packaged with Unity. It's like indispensable, totally crucial library, which lets you do like tweening, which means moving between multiple states over time. So like you can tween rather than just like blinking the axe guy around, you can like move it slowly over time. I don't know if that answers your question or not. But...
No, yeah. So what going back to kind of the board game analogy there, what originally inspired you to create board game like strategy games?
Sure. Yeah, like in 2008 or so, something like that. My girlfriend at the time and now wife, Noelle, we both got into designer board games. So yeah, stuff like Dominion, Munchkin, Catan, and that sort of thing. And it was really inspiring at the time, and still is to this day, because like video games tend to be able to get away with not having the player actually understand the rules, and you can still sort of like play around in the system and learn things through trial and error and whatever, that sort of thing. But the thing I like about board games is the players actually have to know all the rules because there is no like external system enforcing them. So what that means from a game design sense, or from a game design standpoint, is that it has to be simple enough for people to actually know all the rules in order to play. And I really like that because in a strategy game context, right? Sid Meier talked about how, like when they were designing Civilization, early on they fall into this trap where they would make all these kinds of like clever calculations behind the scene and like to do with like terrain and like different unit types matching up and whatever, and like AI decisions and that sort of thing. But it's sort of like not understood by the player. It's like a black box to them. And so when you're playing a strategy game, if you don't understand something, you're not really playing with that part of the system. I don't know if that makes sense, but like that basically it's just random or unknown to you at that point. And so what I really like is games where the players understand all of it, and so they're really like their strategic decisions are their own then, because like if you understand all the rules, then you can just play strategically from there. It's sort of like a precondition for strategy, if that makes sense. So
you also mentioned a few different plugins or third-party services, or whatever you call it. Services is probably not the right word. How do you decide when to pull in a third-party piece of software to supplement your process versus creating something on your own and from scratch? Because like as we're looking here, I'm just trying to like conceptualize where you've used a third-party plugin and kind of try and look at the guts of what we're looking Corey play as we're talking.
Yeah, well, the downside to bringing in a third-party plugin is that there's a couple downsides. One thing is you might not you might run into a situation where it doesn't work anymore for your needs, and you might have to switch again. So like you might run up against some limitation. Whereas if you have the code yourself, then you can just code around that and extend it, basically. So that's one limitation. And the other limitation is if you ever have to update Unity because you want to like deploy to like a new platform, like whatever, then the plugin might not work, be compatible with the new version of Unity. And so, again, you run into this catch-22 situation where it's like, now you might have to re-implement big parts of your code. So, having said that, I'd rather not use a plugin if I can get away with it. But some plugins are so solid and save so much work that it's like worth that cost. And one way to judge that for myself is like, is this something that's been around for a while? Like, does it seem like a lot of people use this? And like, would other people be harmed if this went away? like jump into the same boat as other people,
right?
And so it's like less likely that it'll just go away or be unsupported or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, like the main things for Brinket games are like that grids plugin, like I'm talking about.
Okay.
The UI was done with something called 2D Toolkit, which is no longer supported because it's kind of been like supplanted by like Unity's UI system. Right. Unity did like a big UI overhaul, like it's probably like a few years ago.
Do you ever worry that Brain Good Games would ever become dependent on some of these plugins, that it becomes outside of your control, where it's like you can no longer make a Brain Good game because of the plugin no longer being available?
I think for the most part, because the Brain Good Games plugin or the Brain Good games are all single player and kind of minimalist and strategy games, I think that even if the plugins went away, I'd be able to recode like something that did what DoTween does for me,
right?
Like the tweening stuff, or like I'd be able to code my own grid thing, but it would I just don't need to right now, basically. Yeah, or like Unity changed their UI system a couple years ago, and is using Unity UI now, or like that's the kind of the default flow for people. And so like now that TK2D is kind of past its end of life or like past its support, like I'm slowly like converting things over to like Unity UI and like learning how the Unity UI way of doing things works and that sort of thing. So yeah.
One thing that I think is curious is really interesting is like people's progression in terms of like their skills. So I'm interested to see, as we play more of your games throughout the stream, how they kind of differentiate from each other and how you like make improvements. And with regards to some of the stuff that we're seeing here, as Corey is playing, is there anything that you notice that you kind of go like, I wish I could go back and change that, or I would do this differently?
Well, like he was, when he was first starting the tutorial and learning the controls and stuff, there's a little bit more like stopping and starting or whatever, or like not understanding like how certain mechanics work or whatever. Okay. You can see like even now, like after having played for whatever 10 minutes or 15 minutes, like he's already playing a lot smoother and like feels confident about the moves he's making, like how it's gonna work or whatever. So like I don't really like, Militia's been around for a while and it's had a bunch of patches. This is like version 1.15a, I think. And so like a lot of that stuff has been like the really cringy stuff has been patched out just through feedback on Steam forums, and there Militia was on an Android app and iOS app as well, and so it's had a lot of time to kind of like mature as a game and a product. Not to say it's like, that sounds like I'm saying that's like perfect or something like that. It's not really what I mean, but like I don't really find a lot that's like cringy about it anymore.
I love that relationship that a developer has with their projects, where they can describe it. You know, it's like it's very specific to your relationship with your game. Not to use such a cheesy word, but do you know what I mean? It's like,
oh, it feels like that for sure.
It's like it's like the expression, the it's your black swan or whatever, however you want to phrase it. It's I find that really interesting.
Yeah, to a certain extent, it's like.
To be clear, just to say real quick, to be clear, I'm not saying this game is a black swan.
No.
Yeah.
No. Like to a certain extent, like one thing that I've had to learn after putting out these games is like, as a solo dev, it's easy to get caught in this trap of thinking like that I am these games or whatever, like that they represent how good I am as a human or like how valuable I am as a person or something like that.
Right.
Because like it's all me that has put myself into these games, right? So I've had to learn to like be able to separate myself out from these games. And like, you know, it sounds cliche or whatever, like not every game is going to be for every person, right? So it's like, just because somebody doesn't enjoy one of the Bring It games, you know, whatever, like that's okay.
I really appreciate that kind of attitude. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm not naturally drawn towards puzzle games or strategy-based games, but that doesn't mean that obviously that there's no value there for people that do appreciate it. One thing, so as we move to the next game here, sorry, I guess the question is, what game do you want to jump into next? And then we can kind of maybe see a little of that progression from Militia.
When do we go to Solar Settlers?
Solar Settlers?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Corey, you want to boot up Solar Settlers? And...
Congratulations on rank 2 there, Corey.
Yeah, when you said I was getting more confident, I'm like, I don't know if any strategy game ever makes me abundantly confident, but it was getting definitely getting easier, and I it's really hard to describe in terms of like how it feels as a player, but definitely like the hardest part is explaining the mechanics, but it really does feel really like the how it's ultimately constructed and how those mechanics come together is actually quite a bit more engaging than I think it initially appears. Like, this is not my style of game, similar to how it's not Daniel's style of game, but as I was playing it, I was like, this is giving me some Minesweeper vibes and some you know, some other kind of vibes that are sorry, I gotta find the, I think I accidentally, oh, where's the game? I'm just trying to find it, but yeah, gave me some vibes that I thought were like really, really positive.
Yeah.
And the only one I kept quitting out of because I thought it was like broken and I was trying to cover that it was might have been broken was that it spawned my guy in the top corner, and if it just flashed or something, I would have known. But I was just like, oh no, I didn't realize I had 2 men basically, so I kept being like, oh, this is busted. But otherwise, like, yeah, I'm actually pretty impressed. Like, the graphics are very simple, but I really did feel that like the victory did hit me with that like endorphins of like. Yeah. Of like, you did a good job, and I'm like, oh yay, I did good, you know. And I actually think I'm gonna like revisit that one after this, because it's just like I could see wasting hours on it, to be honest.
Great.
Cool. So do you want to give
I want to make one comment about that, like what Corey's saying, like about how it's like more engaging than it initially appears. That's sort of like the most stereotypical Bring It Games review. Like, that's like the platonic ideal of a Bring It Games review. Like, Steam pages are like littered with that. It's like, oh, it's actually more fun than I thought. Like, so yeah, I don't know if that says something about like the way they look or the way they play, but yeah.
So as we jump into Solar Settlers here, do you want to give us a kind of a quick little primer?
Sure, and definitely do the tutorial. I think Corey, if I hit the learn button. Yeah, so Solar Settlers I did a few years later, and this is sort of roughly inspired by one of my, well, probably my favorite board game of all time, which is Race for the Galaxy. And so the general idea of this game is that you mankind has sent out, like, the sun is exploding, it's going supernova, so mankind has sent out a bunch of spaceships to discover whether galaxies in the far reaches of space can sustain life. So you're one of those colony ships, and you're going to find out if this galaxy is good enough to sustain life. And you do that by exploring with basically cards on this board here. So you start in your colony ship in the middle there, and you're gonna explore outwards and explore some of the cards there, and you're gonna get more little worker guys, and gonna be able to get oxygen, hydrogen, metal, and combine them and play all kinds of cards.
So one thing I'm noticing already, for my, like, coming from a person that is not naturally drawn towards strategy-based games, is that the like 3D nature of this. I understand it is very much 2D. There is absolutely no 3D, but just even like the fact that I can kind of see through the board. I'm like in an environment that is like in 3D space. For some reason, that helps me. As an outsider, I'll call it. It helps me like kind of, I don't know what the word is, be drawn towards this kind of project. So, what was, and I guess my follow-up question based off of that statement is, What was the thought process behind the kind of design here compared to Militia?
So this is, I think, the 5th Brain game that I made.
Okay.
And so this one came about really easily, like in terms of design. It's like one of those things like where like it felt like it designed itself or something like that. Like I made a paper prototype with like cards and scribbled pencil drawings and played it with a few friends. Like I would kind of like play the role of the computer and have players run through it or whatever on the table. And it came together really quickly. And as far as the theme, I don't know, like it definitely has more theming or more like atmosphere or environment or whatever, like you're saying, than Militia does. Militia is pretty abstract. And I think that's helped it a lot. It's by far the best-selling Brain game, this one.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. And then part of that atmosphere is provided by the like 3D space backgrounds, like you were saying. That is a great idea for using for plugins, like Unity plugins or asset packs or something like that. If there are a lot of very, very talented artists out there, and you can buy, I think this, it's like a whole pack of like planet visuals or whatever, and I think I bought the whole pack for like $10. And it did immeasurably good things for the game. So yeah, totally recommend buying that kind of thing.
So you mentioned you brought up paper prototyping, and before you mentioned that, I was curious about your development process. You know, so we'll take like Militia. It sounded like you didn't use a paper prototype. Correct me if I'm mistaken. But for this one, you did. So what was the reasoning behind your approach for this game?
I think it's because, and by the way, I can show you here. I don't know if you can see, but there's
cool.
like my bin of like prototyping bit.
I've seen Dylan has one of those. I've seen Dylan bring that around to jams in the past.
Yeah, it's really helpful. But I think the reason that a jam would be really good context for that, actually, because the reason that I think I paper prototyped Solar Settlers and not Militia is that the Solar Settlers idea came together really quickly. And so it was kind of like a not fully formed, but largely formed idea right from the start. So I was able to like put it on paper and try it out, which was a lot faster than coding something and then finding out that it was wrong and throwing out a bunch of code,
Right.
which is not a great idea. So, but with Militia, it was more of like an incrementalist approach. Like I just put up I knew I wanted to make something on a grid, so I just like put up a grid with like an axe guy and like an orc, and like played it, like I just walked around the grid like that for a while and played around with that, and then like sort of the idea of the captains kind of grew out of that, and it's sort of like it was more of like an evolved design than like a top-down, all at once design.
So did you approach the tutorial differently than you did in your previous example that we were playing on stream here?
Very much so. Yeah. My tutorial, my tutorial technique changed a lot over the course of the game. So yeah, in Militia, I had like these like levels and like a tutorial menu and stuff like that. And like as you saw, like there were several like tutorial steps where Corey had to like go back and try again or whatever. And I found that by and large, people do not like failing in the tutorial at all. Like it's like something that, for some reason, that's like a gamer cultural thing that people like. They feel like if they fail in the tutorial, like there's something wrong with the game or something like that. I don't know. But so then basically my approach from then on became, and this grew out of Axes and Acres tutorial. But anyway. My approach then is basically ripped right from FTL. I don't know if you played FTL, but it's this like tutorial where there's like a dialogue box and like arrows that point at things. And also, it's not only that. So like, it'll point at what you need to do first of all, like where you need to click or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then not only that, but it doesn't allow you to get off track. Like it enforces the rules. Like, so the Militia tutorial is more like freeform, right? Like that was inspired by like Half-Life 2 or something, where it like just gives you a prompt and then allows you to try and solve it yourself. but this is like enforced and won't let you get off track.
So is this game is using some of the same plugins that we were talking about during Militia? So it's using that grid system. It's using
Go Tween.
Okay, cool.
And TK2D as well. I think that. Oh, and Steamworks, like because all the games are on Steam, it uses like a plugin called Steamworks.net, which handles like the back end communication with the Steam server stuff.
So one thing that's just kind of popping out to me a little bit as I'm watching is the kind of sounds, and we talked about it during Militia, but one thing I'm realizing is it's easy to kind of get sounds or use resources that is available, but how do you kind of put them together in a way that sounds good? Because I'm hearing the little bloops and bleeps, and it sounds like it should sound, whatever that means.
Well, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Like for sounds, like I use a lot of like freesound.org or freesfx.org. I don't remember. There's a lot of like free sound websites or whatever where you can get WAV files of like different people recording, dropping a bunch of pebbles on a blanket or whatever. There's all kinds of different things to do.
So in terms of creating the sounds, you have access to these like resources, and you just kind of put them in places where it makes sense, and that's
part of it, but a lot of the times the sounds need to be like tweaked in some way. And so for that I use like Audacity.
Okay.
And
cool.
in Audacity you can like pitch shift things or make them shorter or longer, or like a lot of the sounds will have like wildly different volumes, so I'll like normalize those in Audacity rather than like try to have like different sound volumes in the game somehow or in code or something like that. I'll just make it so the waves are all like at the right level more or less. Yeah. Or like reverb, like a lot of like this is for the spacey feel. Like there's a lot of reverb on like all the sounds. This game.
Okay, so it's interesting to know that there's like that thought that goes into it, you know, because when I just look at it, not that I don't appreciate it, but I just maybe the player or the viewer doesn't understand that there is like that thought that's going into it beyond just kind of resource or audio files that are taken from here or there.
Yeah, it's sort of thing like where you would notice if it wasn't there.
Right. Right.
Yeah. One thing about game sounds in particular is like you want the game sound to start like right, like as soon as the action happens. Like right when you one of the fundamental like joys of video games, I think, is like press button thing happens. Like in Mario on the NES, like when you press the A button, it plays that bloop sound and Mario goes up. Like that's like a fundamental joy of video games, I think. So it's really important to like have like tangible feedback when you do something. So when you click on a card or something, like it makes the bloop right away, so that you know that like regardless of like whether you know it's strategically good or whatever, you know that your input was registered. You know what I mean?
Right.
It feels good to be knowledge about the system like that.
I'm really interested to hear that, because it's like I think those are the kind of things maybe that is easy to overlook, because subconsciously when I was asking that question, that's what I was referring to. It's satisfying to know that as we're doing an action, there's like a not a verbal, an audio confirmation that like my click worked.
Right. Yeah, I think that's crucial. I think that's like one of the fundamental things that's great about video games, and you definitely notice when it's not there. Like one of the worst feelings in video games is when you click and you're not sure whether like the game knew that you clicked, or when you press a button, same thing.
So is this you mentioned during the previous game, Militia, that there was a number of things that you iterated on since its inception, or since the original release date. Does this fall into the same category where you have, since the initial launch, you have iterated on it and fixed like little things here and there?
Absolutely, a lot. There's a lot of feedback that I got from especially the Steam forums.
Okay.
And so like this looks like it's version 1.07F.
Okay.
So yeah, that means like 7 major updates since launch, and then like the letter is like a patch update, like a bug or something like that.
Okay.
And so yeah, a lot of iteration on that kind of thing. And also after I launched this on PC, I made a mobile port on Android and iOS. So that was like another whole round of bug fixing, iteration, UI changes, and stuff like that.
So is there like, so we're playing the most recent version of it right now. Is there like a specific or obvious example of something that you fixed?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I can talk a little bit about my process.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that works.
Like, basically, when a project like this, for me, like, it'll get to a state where the game is like single done. Like, all the features are in, basically. And then what I like to do is just like play test it for however long I can stand, or however long it takes to fill up a page of notes. Okay? So I'll just like play and just like write down, this is a bug, this is like a UI thing that's annoying, this is like unclear in the tutorial, blah, blah, blah. And I make a page of notes. And then I'll go and fix that page of notes, and then I'll play test until I have another page of notes. And basically you just do that until it takes a really long time to get a page of notes. And then at that point it's like, okay, well, there's not a lot that's like so obvious that needs to be fixed immediately, you know.
Interesting.
I'm mildly stuck. One note though is I am listening and trying to figure it out at the same time, so don't take my failures too literally.
It looks like you have to click end turn, I think. Oh. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a bug.
Interesting. Look at that.
Anyway, you're basically through the whole. Oh, there you go. End turn.
So is this an example, like, this is like a interesting point. So let's say, I'm not sure if that was a bug or not, but if it was, like, how do you like take that in and like put time into fixing it, or do you just kind of chalk that up as like, it is what it is?
Yeah, I definitely try to fix all the bugs that I know about.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, like.
So you don't just like ship something out and then kind of like it's done. You kind of wipe your hands of it.
No, I have this. I really like this idea that like I can make a game like Militia in 2015, and then it'll still be good to play in 2020 and beyond. You know, like there's not, because the game like Militia is clearly not about like graphical, like wowing the players with amazing graphics, right? So like, or like some kind of technological advance or something like that. So I try to make the games so that they can like, as long as players find them interesting, they can keep playing them later. You know, like, so part of that is like maintaining them bug wise. Yeah.
Interesting. I don't know if we want to jump into another game here, if you want.
Well, let's see. Would you want to maybe try Militia 2, Corey?
Sure thing.
Oh, that'll be interesting to see, like the differences in the like kind of progression in a very like, what's it called? What's the word for a sequel? In a very sequel-esque fashion.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like how when I exited, it was like play again with like very persistent arrows. I was like, should I?
You could.
Let's see here. Yeah, so I guess as Corey's switching here, I wanted to kind of bring up a few general questions. This may be like a larger question. We can break it down if needed, but what is it like working like with Steam and putting like games on Steam compared to other platforms?
Steam is amazing. They're an incredible partner. I think they take a revenue share as part of the agreement for sales, but they're like, from my perspective as a solo indie small time niche guy,
right? Like
they're an indispensable partner. I made several orders of magnitude more money on Steam than any other platform. As long as your game has like some initial traction of its own, they'll like support it with like visibility, with eyeballs that I could just never get. And also like they target the visibility based on like games that like to people that might find a game like this interesting. So like recently Slay the Spire came out, right? And that's like a big single player strategy game type of thing in the indie scene. And so like my games will get visibility rounds on the Slay the Spire page and stuff like that, because like people that are playing Slay the Spire might be into this kind of thing. And that's just like, you can't, I can't overstate how helpful that kind of thing is.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that I've noticed, the first thing I noticed about this game is that, and this is a very like weird observation, but like I'm more drawn to this game because of the color palette compared to Militia 1, which is like it seems like such a, I don't know what the word is, but it's interesting how certain things can grab certain people.
Yeah. Well, this color palette is directly lifted from Super Mario World.
Okay, so maybe there's something there.
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite games of all time.
Right.
And I just love that like cheery summer day, blue, white, and green aesthetic. There's something about it that's so charming. And so I knew before I made the sequel, I knew that I was going to use that color palette somewhere.
Cool. So I actually want to get into a bunch of things like around the sequel. So I guess the first one is where did the birth of a sequel come from? So up to this, I don't know where this falls into your timeline, but I would imagine that you had been making a number of single, like non-sequels, just kind of original IPs, I suppose.
Yeah.
When and why did you decide to create a sequel?
So this is the 7th game and the most recent Brings game. And so the first and the 7th game are Militia 1 and Militia 2. When and why did I decide to make a sequel? It's a good question. I think most of it is like I had, by that point, I felt like I had a really good sense of like what made Militia cool. Mm-hmm. And I had some ideas about how I could like double down on that and just make it happen more often, basically. And yeah, that's why I made it.
So what are some of those differences that are represented in what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, so like one of the fundamental things that I think is cool about Militia 1 is it's kind of a game because you have like 3 pieces, right? And they all have like distinct abilities. The fun of the game is like synergizing them. It's like using the horse with the mace guy together. And so the sequel is attempting to like double down on that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So like all the abilities are designed to synergize with each other, much more like, there's some abilities that work that way in Militia 1, but in Militia 2 that's like doubled down on and emphasized. A lot more synergy type of stuff. Combos and that kind of thing. And then also there's a bunch of like quality of life and like user interface type stuff that got changed. Or maybe that's not even the right way to put it, but it's just like it's more I moved more in the way of like approachability for this one. There's just certain things that are a little bit friendlier. Like one of the mechanics in Militia is that if your unit gets captured, like just happened to Corey there, you'll see like his unit is now like locked in jail in that orc.
Okay.
So in Militia 1, you wouldn't get that unit back until the next floor. But in Militia 2, if you kill that orc, you'll get the unit back right away and you'll be able to use it right away. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like a friendly, like, it's more of like a flowing, less punishing type of feel to it.
I noticed that the tutorial was much quicker too. Like you didn't make me play and clear out everything. It was just kind of like, you got this, and then like the board changes to a new scenario to teach me that specific scenario. It's a lot tighter than the last one.
And that's part of that move from like towards like an FTL style tutorial. And the reason I went to like FTL that I found FTL's tutorial really inspiring is because like FTL is actually like a really complicated game. But I never had heard about anybody like bouncing off of it in the tutorial or like stopping playing because it was too hard or something like that. And that's like the last thing I want to have happen is people to get discouraged by the tutorial. It's like a nightmare scenario. It's like they're willing to play and they started up the app and they're like playing and then the tutorial turns them away. Like that's, not good at all. So the goal shifted a little bit from the player knows literally every mechanic in the game. And even Militia 1 tutorial emphasizes some of it teaches you about some of the synergies between the units. But in Militia 2, the goal of the tutorial is to give you the basics and to make sure you can get through it, and then to let you play and discover that stuff on your own. More so. Yeah, that's the direction I went in there.
Interesting. So, so you said this is the most recent Bring Good Games.
Yeah.
So is it, what are you doing differently behind the scenes for this project? Or are you using the same tried and true formulas that you've used in the past?
I think I'm just having made 7 of them now. I think I'm better at making code that I can reuse. So there's Steam leaderboards in a lot of the games, and the code for that is much easier to port to new games now. Or a lot of the board code will be the same, or once you've coded options settings page or whatever, you don't want to do it again because it's just the same work. It's
right.
You have the resolution dialogue, and you have the volume controls, and you have that kind of thing. So I've gotten better about making that kind of stuff reusable, which saves a lot of time.
So what is your thoughts on kind of growing Bring Good Games? And that doesn't necessarily need to mean like in terms of people, but you talked about how you use a minimalist approach through the graphics and some of the other things. Do you ever think about... Oh, I gotta fix my webcam. Do you ever think about using skills from other people that you may not have to supplement your projects in the future, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been doing a lot more I've been trying to do a lot more collaboration this year. Oh, can you hear me still?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I've been trying to do a lot more collaboration this year, so I've been doing a few game jams and working on one of the inspirations for Bring Good Games in general, the single player ladder part, was this designer called Keith Burgun, and I've been doing some projects with him lately, and just trying to, I don't know, explore a little bit more not the solo side of things, collaboration and that sort of thing.
And that just comes from wanting to get outside of that comfort zone, or just that that process that you have been doing for a number of years?
Yeah, I think so. Part of the rush of doing a game solo is at the end I can look at Militia and Militia 2 and Solar Settlers and go I made these things, and they're an expression of my creativity, and they're made exactly the way that I would have made them.
Right.
All the decisions, made all the decisions. But I've found that over time the rush of that kind of diminishes a little bit.
Right.
Once I don't get as big a kick out of it being my own vision as I used to, I think.
Interesting.
So now I'm more interested in seeing how my sort of game design sensibility interacts with other people, and exploring that a little bit more. Yeah, and just plus personality-wise, I love variety, and so it's just trying something different.
Do you, and I guess maybe you kind of touched on that, do you ever think about breaking the kind of the formula that you've been using within Bring Good Games? So a lot of the projects that you've kind of put out there are strategy board game-esque projects. Do you ever think about kind of really turning that on its head and making something wildly different?
Yeah, definitely. I have this weird prototype of a football action game,
Cool.
a real-time football game.
Let's do that. I love non-sports games.
Yeah, I think sports games are great. I really love NHL '95 for the Super Nintendo.
Cool.
I think I don't know, it's a great game. And one of the cool things about it is it's very kind of arcadey feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's not trying to be a perfect simulation of hockey.
Right.
Like like EA games are more like that, right? Like they try to like get like the audience like looking realistic and the like having the commentators and stuff like that. But something what I appreciate more about games is like the systems and how those work and how like it feels like playing hockey, or just that it feels interesting and cool. And so yeah, like I have a football prototype that's kind of like that, like kind of like an arcadey style football game that maybe I'll finish someday. And then also, I've been learning recently how to code multiplayer games in Unity, like multiplayer online games. And so that's like another direction that I'm like sort of toying with exploring in the future for sure.
It's interesting you mentioned that because as I'm like looking at Corey playing here, it seems like that's kind of, like it kind of would naturally complement what you've been making, like a multiplayer, like real-time or turn-based kind of brain good game style game. Or like maybe that's something we can see in the future.
Yeah, maybe so, man. Yeah, I totally think that'd be cool to explore. One of the first comments I ever got on Steam, like from Militia 1, was like, "When's the multiplayer version coming? What about two-player?" And it's like at the time, like I was nowhere near a good enough programmer to like attempt that kind of thing.
Right.
So
nothing's stopping you now, though.
Yeah. Well, I'm slowly learning.
Right.
I'm trying to read a lot and pick it up. So yeah.
Interesting. So I'm just listening to like the sounds again. It's really cool how you can take advantage of resources that are available to make something that you would have maybe been unable to otherwise.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really inspiring time to be making games right now. Like, you can get away with not being able to draw and not being an audio engineer and whatever. Like, but with some basic, like I use Paint.net for like graphics manipulation stuff, and I use Audacity for audio manipulation stuff. And with some like basic knowledge of that stuff, you can get away with something that feels like a product and like people feel comfortable paying money for and playing, and like it feels finished, And so the sky's the limit right now. Like it's awesome.
I want to say I thought I was done. Like I was down to one guy, and the field's getting pretty full, and it felt super good to be like get my guys back. Basically, I really thought that felt super good. Now I feel like, even though I still feel like I might be screwed, there's that guy in the top corner who's the target that I might be able to get. But just that reversal, that ability to reverse, like a lot of strategy games, you sort of make some critical errors, and you're just in this spiral of you're done. Basically, it's like sometimes in chess you're just playing rounds, but you're already dead.
Totally.
And I really appreciate that there is ways to reverse course a bit in this game.
Cool. Yeah, that's one of the changes from Militia 1 to Militia 2 actually, and part of the reason for that is because like because this is a very minimalist strategy game, like you only have 3 units, right? So losing one of your 3 units is like a third of your force, right? Like that's a huge disadvantage. Whereas like even in chess you have 16 guys, right? Like so like losing a pawn is only 1 out of 16 of your guys. So yeah, like the rescuing mechanic here is to try to circumvent that like natural like snowballing thing that Corey's talking about for sure.
Interesting. So yeah, let's jump into another game maybe.
Maybe let's see. Maybe Minos Strategos?
Minos Strategos. Okay, let's take a look. So we talked about how a lot of these games you've made on your own, and how you've recently been trying to kind of branch out and kind of collaborate. In your experience in creating all the brain good games that you've kind of put out there, what are your, from your perspective, what are some of the toughest challenges in going the solo route?
Toughest challenge is going the solo route. Well, one thing you have to definitely do is manage scope carefully, right? Which is like, I don't know, it's like cliche in
yeah. That is what it
but
is.
Like, you have to commit to something that you can finish. Or like, I'm a big fan of committing to something that I can finish. I really like finishing games and like releasing them and having them be like a fully done thing. And so I try to do that carefully. And that's something like with the solo dev. I mean, but really that's not only the case with the solo dev, because like when you're working on a team, you have a lot of overhead of like collaboration type stuff. There's a lot of additional work that needs to be done with a team that I kind of get away with not doing by being solo. So it's kind of a double-edged sword that way. So I don't know, like about specific disadvantages of being solo.
Or maybe not necessarily just at disadvantages, but more so, I guess, that experience, I suppose. Although there are inherent disadvantages.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the experience. One of the really nice things about being solo is, like I was talking about, like getting to feel like the game is exactly the way that I would make it, and I don't have to like pitch ideas or like argue for my position or whatever. I can just like go with it, and like sort of prove it out. Like I don't have to convince anybody that this like game or this game idea or this mechanic or this UI approach is going to be interesting or cool. I can just do it, and sort of like the proof is in the pudding or whatever, you know. So I really like that part.
So do you are you able to walk us through kind of what we're seeing here and give us an overview on what did you say the name of this game was that we're playing now?
Minos Strategos.
Minos I always had the hardest time pronouncing this one. Minos Strategos.
Whatever, however you want to pronounce it, that's correct.
I guess before we get into the kind of concept that you have going here, how do you go about naming your games? This seems like the funnest, the most fun and weirdest / hardest.
Sorry, I lost a second there.
Yeah, so I'm just curious about how you go about naming your projects, because that's always fun, but also hard, but also easy. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, you're lagging a bit on my end here. Let's see. I don't know what I can do.
Corey, do you want to try jumping in real quick?
Hello?
Is the voice lagging or is it the stream?
Sure.
I can hear Corey fine, but Daniel, you're lagging.
I'm lagging. Okay.
Minotaurs. Yeah, you sound a bit like a robot.
I do?
So what was the question? Oh yeah, about naming games. Yeah, I do a lot of like. I have done like a bunch of like Twitter polls, or like I'll like write. I know a couple times I like wrote like 50 different names for. I think I wrote like 50 different names for Solar Settlers on a whiteboard, and then kind of like whittled it down to 5, and then did like a Twitter poll and just like slept on it for a week or so. I really for that one in particular, I wanted to get it right. But like Solar Settlers is kind of like a much more marketable name than like Minos Strategos. Specifically, like when I chose this is like one of the things where like I don't have to convince anybody of the name exactly. So like I can just call it Minos Strategos if I want.
And I just want to.
Even though it's a cool name.
Are you able to hear me all right now, or is it still coming through choppy?
Somewhat. Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Okay. So yeah, I guess. Do you want to give us an overview of this game? Oh no.
Yeah,
Sure.
and I can always ask some questions because there's sort of a combination throughout your games of card-based mechanics. This one feeling so far the most like cards because I can kind of manipulate the box a bit. But and then like this grid formation. What is the impetus for having like a grid formation style layout? I mean, even Solar Settlers, which was a little bit more of an abstract board, because you kind of like build into the board. You know, I'm just curious as to why this is the style that you often sort of are inspired to develop with.
Why the games have grids, I guess?
Why
boards,
grids?
kind of?
Like grids and cards, and it's all about positional kind of tactical movements
Yeah.
throughout all of these games. That seems to be like a through line so far.
Totally. So one thing that I really don't like in strategy games is like when I have to do a lot of counting. So like if like I don't want to have it be the kind of thing where you can calculate out like the best move, and like if I do this I'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times 2 sheep or whatever, and that will let me convert into this many victory points or whatever. I really don't want to count like that at all. So one thing like that a board lets you get away with is players naturally have like a sort of heuristic understanding of like how like space and positioning and boards work, and you can kind of use like more of your fast intuitive gut feel to play, rather than if it's very spreadsheety or numbers based, you often have to do a lot of counting or calculation. So that's part of the reason for that.
Interesting. So I'm noticing a color palette that for some reason I'm drawn to. Is there some inspiration for the color palette in this game?
Yeah, well, it's sort of trying to evoke like a ancient Greek pottery or something like that, okay. Or like just ancientiness.
Ancient.
And yeah, I do try to give like each of the games like a pretty distinct color palette, because I think it like helps you like remember the games a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And it's like it's a non-asset way for the games to stand out by having a striking color palette. So I do spend a decent amount of time thinking about that for sure.
Interesting. And let's take a look here.
And you can right click to undo if you want to try something else, Corey. This game in particular is directly inspired by a board game called Tashkalar. Which is a game, interesting, it's like Tashkalar.
Oh gosh, I'm not even gonna
But interestingly,
try.
That game is like probably not even in my top 50 board games of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But like part of the reason I made this game is because like I thought that there was something interesting about that game that wasn't coming across when I played it. Like it was like too finicky for me to play that version of it, so it's like, well, I'll make a version that like feels less finicky to me.
Interesting.
So it's not even like the case that you have to be inspired by something that you think is great. Like oftentimes it's enough to be inspired by something that has a kernel of something that you think is great, if that makes sense.
That's fair.
And when it comes to like making these as video games, why don't you just not why don't you just, as if this is invalid, this is fine, but like haven't you pursued making video games or like making actual board games? Like there are definitely people in the city who make board games. Have you ever considered either modifying it to fit that, or you know, like you could release Militia as a board game maybe?
Totally.
I'm just sort of curious about that thought process.
Yeah, the short answer is that it's a lot harder. Basically, if I make a board game, then I have to do a lot of production type of thinking. And I'm much more interested in, first and foremost, doing the game design part of things. And then sort of secondarily, I enjoy doing programming. But to the extent that I can avoid like logistics or managerial or like shipping or Kickstarter type stuff, I do try to avoid that. So that's part of what's great about partnering with Steam is they handle a lot of the visibility, order fulfillment, backend, downloading, updates, all that stuff for me, so I can focus on game design and programming primarily.
So I want to throw up one more game here before we wrap up the stream, and I kind of wanted to touch on some more general questions. I just figured it'd be cool to throw in one more of your projects. So
sure.
Yeah. Which one did you want to give a spin?
Whatever you think, Corey. Whatever jumps out at you. Your brain geek games experience now, so you can.
We're gonna do Rolling in the Reef.
Great.
It's the most playful aesthetic.
Cool.
Why do the fish get murdered versus the militiamen? I don't know if the fish get murdered, but
I don't think there's any fish Or maybe you murder for some fish. Maybe there is some fish murder.
Oh gosh.
But the fish are dice, so and also like that happens under the sea, man. That is under the sea is a rough place.
Are the fish dice? If they're dice, then why are they fish?
They are both dice and fish. Yes.
There we go. They have two superposition states at once.
Yes.
I like it.
Cool.
Yeah,
So, do you want to give a quick primer of Rolling the Reef, and then I kind of have some more general questions about your philosophy and plans and things like that.
Sure. So this is like a Brain Good Games dice game. And Axes and Acres has dice as well, but this is like a very traditional dice game. Like literally these fish have their dice and you roll them, and they have like this orange fish at least is like a regular old D6, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so yeah, it's just playing around in that dice game design space. And then also, like Corey was alluding to, it's a little bit more of a playful, bright, cheerful type of theme. Yeah, just playing in that space too.
So, out of all the games that you've made and put out there, which have kind of had the best like reception?
Commercially, Solar Settlers has had the best reception.
Okay.
It sold the most and has the best reviews. Yeah, I've been very lucky. It's kind of done better than I could have ever hoped. And Axes and Acres has a smaller but very dedicated group of players. Axes and Acres is like kind of harder to learn. It's like probably the most complicated Brain Good game. And that's like sort of the game that like spurred my my need to learn how to do a different tutorial technique. Because like when Axes and Acres launched, people were having a lot of trouble like even getting through the tutorial. So we did like a reboot of like the whole tutorial for that. But what was your question? Lost track of your question.
Oh, so I was talking about which of your games have had the most positive reception or the best reception.
Yeah, so probably Axes and Acres players play the most. Like the most dedicated Axes and Acres players have like 400 plus hours of Axes and Acres.
Wow, that's okay. So that was higher than I anticipated.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good metric.
Yeah. So that one's got like some legs or some staying power for people that really want to dive into it. And that's sort of part of the Brain Good Games design ethos in general, is like all these games have like a single player ladder, and that was part of the reason that I started Brain Good Games in the first place, is I really don't like it when I really enjoy a game and then I feel like I have to stop playing it because I've like run out of content. So like as a kid, like I would play Super Mario World and I like love Super Mario World. But eventually, like you've played all the levels enough times, and you kind of get the game, and there's like no more variety or challenge left there, and it was always disappointing to me. And then Nintendo doesn't release like any new levels, so you're kind of hooked. So, Brain Good Games have two things that help fight this. Like, there's a single player ladder, so like if you win a game in a Brain Good game, you'll rank up, and then the game will get harder. And so as you get better at the game, you'll face different challenges. The computer opponent will be harder and harder. And then also, they all feature like random board setups and random like levels kind of or whatever. So like that doesn't expire either, or you don't run out of content that way either. So that way, like if people are having fun playing Axes and Acres, they don't have to worry about like running out of content. Like it's not like a content driven game in that way, which is more like a board game, right? Like you don't ever think that like you're gonna run out of like Monopoly doesn't end, you know, you can just like play again. You know, like it ends when you get bored of it. Is maybe the better way to say it.
So one thing that I find interesting is that you can have a game that has the best reception, a better reception through like the ratings or commercially. But what I'm also curious to know is like what game kind of has a special place in your heart, like aside from some of the reception stuff or commercial success. Which game did you have the most fun making?
I really like Minos Strategos quite a bit. I have a soft spot in my heart for that one for sure.
I like that.
Yeah. And then as far as the most fun making, Minos Strategos came together really quickly. Solar Settlers came together really quickly, and like when games come together quickly like that, it feels like you're playing a game kind of, because you're like exploring like this is all working, and it's like I'm kind of discovering the game as much as I'm making it, which is cool. That's another reason that I like the Brain Good Games randomized level setup, is because I can actually play Brain Good Games because I don't know how the levels work. Like I don't know all the secrets, and in fact, I'm much worse at the games than the top players are. And then so so that's a soft spot in my heart for Minos Strategos for sure.
Nice. So I kind of want to get into before we officially wrap up here into some of the things that surround the future of like Brain Good Games. So
Sure.
and one of those things I'm curious about that we kind of touched on a bit. So if you're able to expand on that,
Sure.
like, have you ever considered about expanding into a studio format? I know we talked about the pros and cons of that, but and you're doing some collaboration as of late, as of recently. So
so yes, I've thought about that a lot. And Axes and Acres and SkyBoats were both like collaborative projects actually, but with a partner. But yes, I thought about it, but there are a lot of challenges with even bringing on one more person. Like going from 1 to 2 is like a huge chasm, unbelievable leap in terms of like business. First of all, you have to like figure out if you're going to sell the product, you have to figure out that side of things. In terms of like whatever revenue splitting and whatever, there's a whole like side of businessy considerations. And then also just on a production standpoint, there's a whole set of considerations about like workflow and sharing files and collaboration and pitching ideas to each other and coming to some kind of consensus on direction and this kind of thing. So that's a whole nother set of challenges. And then there's also another set of challenges in terms of like paying people, right? Like if you're not going to do like some kind of revenue split or like if there's going to be like a studio head or somebody that runs it, then you have to pay people up front, like a salary or whatever.
Right.
And so then that brings into it like a whole can of worms of like financial risk. And the last thing I want to do is put myself in a position where I have to stop making these games,
Right.
or making games at all. And so part of the reason that the Brain Good Games are like I've released a few of them and I've done it solo is to kind of like minimize the financial risk of each project. So that's like another set of considerations. However, having said all that, yes, I would like to collaborate with other people and figure it out and cross those hurdles. Just saying that those hurdles exist.
Interesting. Cool. Well, I mean, I personally always enjoy talking to you. I think you are like a really great representation of kind of a disciplined approach to making games, and to be able to support yourself in whatever fashion you are. I think it really kind of is important for people to see that are maybe wanting to pursue a similar avenue. So I guess my last kind of question, maybe I'll end on, unless Corey wanted to jump in, he's welcome to, but what advice would you have for people that want to pursue a similar career? I know I've asked you this question before, but I'm wondering if you kind of have a different thought on that now.
Well, I don't know if the thought's different because I don't remember what I said the first time. But what I will say is focus on making things that you can finish, which is standard indie game advice, but I think it's true. And also, one thing that I like to focus on is it takes a lot of work to take something from like where you can play it to where it feels like a product.
Right.
And like, I don't know. But it's not impossible. Like you can totally do it. And there's lots of tools and available, and Unity is great, and you can deploy to a lot of different platforms. And Steam can handle like selling stuff. Or if you don't want to release on Steam, you can release on itch.io and get paid. So I don't know. I think that people should value their work enough to charge for it.
Right.
If they think it's awesome. I think that when I started out, I released Militia on Android for free with ads. And I think part of that was like a lack of confidence in like how good the game was. But if you think your game is good enough to play, I think it's good enough to pay money for. Like the difference between $0 and $5 is not a lot for somebody that's interested in your game already. So the key is making something that's interesting for people, valuable for people first, and then I don't think you should have any qualms about charging for it. You can totally do that and support yourself and live the dream.
Cool. So I'm just gonna pull up as we kind of end here. I'm just gonna change some things around here. One moment. Yeah. So I wanted to thank everyone for watching. I wanted to thank you, Brett, for kind of sharing your games with us and providing some Steam keys so we were able to download them and kind of play them on stream here.
Let's some shout out to where people can buy his stuff as we close out.
Yes. Actually, that's thanks for mentioning that, Corey. So where can people follow you and kind of your some of your stuff that you're making, Brain Good Games? How can they keep in touch with that?
So if you go to braingoodgames.com, all the games are listed there on all the platforms, Android, iOS, and Steam on PC, Mac, and Linux.
Okay.
And also, like, my Twitter's there, and there's a Brain Good Games Discord, and I also have a game design blog that I run, and that's all there. It's all on braingoodgames.com.
Cool. So people can like keep in touch with you there, whether it's through social media or otherwise, and then all of like store links are all up on there.
Everything's up there. Yep.
Cool. So yeah, I wanted to thank you for kind of coming on stream here and kind of sharing with the community your work. Corey for kind of behind the scenes in advance in everything that we've been doing to set up this event and kind of playing on stream here. And yeah, if you want to kind of keep in touch with IGDA and the events that we're doing, and stay tuned for the episode 4 with the next developer. By all means, please follow us on Twitter, join our Facebook group and our Facebook page, and follow us here on Twitch. So hit that follow button, and in the future when we go live, we go live a couple times a month, roughly. You can kind of get that notification. And yeah, thank you, Brett. If there's anything else you wanted to add, yeah.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Okay,
cool.
Cheers. Thanks for watching, everyone.